Highlighting big races across the country as we march to the midterms in November. Today, it's all about the Commonwealth of Virginia, where Hillary Clinton's former running mate wants to be reelected to the U.S. Senate. However, a trio of Republican candidates are looking to unseat Tim Kaine from his post, representing the Old Dominion state. Joining us right now to weigh in is pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson. Kristen, good morning to you.
Good morning. All
right, so we got over on the big screen three guys. Corey Stewart, who came close to beating Ed Gillespie, Nick Freitas, an Army vet, Green Beret, and E.W. Jackson. Do one of these candidates have what it takes to beat Tim Kaine?
It's going to be an uphill battle. Tim Kaine being affiliated with Hillary Clinton, that would be a bad sign in many other states that Republicans are on offense in, but Hillary Clinton won the state by 5. So it means that it's not necessarily as much of a hindrance, but you can't really make any confident predictions about what might happen this November. I think Nick Freitas is really an interesting candidate because he's not run statewide before, but has the backing of folks like Rand Paul, Mike Lee, an Army guy. I think he's the one that has the most potential if he can get his name out there in the state of Virginia to really put up a fight.
Sure. The way Virginia works is up around Washington, D.C., it's very blue. A lot of Democrats all working in Washington. Then the balance of the state becomes much redder the further south you go. Really, it comes down to who in November will be able to energize their base. Will it be the Democrats saying, hey, you know, Tim Kaine, you voted for him time and time again. Will you go ahead and turn out for him? Or do you want the Republicans to continue to control the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, so Northern Virginia, you're absolutely right, is the sort of place where Democrats do quite well. And those are the voters that turned out in huge numbers back last November in that governor's race. While precincts that had voted for Donald Trump, when his name wasn't on the ballot, they didn't have as many voters as they needed to counter the Dems. So you'll need a candidate who can really energize those Republican voters, even though Trump's name's on the not on the ballot, and get them to turn out.
And also you need to get the President of the United States himself to turn out and stump for the candidate, whoever it is.
I imagine that Republican candidates are going to want to have Trump's support in order to get their base energized. The real question is, how many swing voters are they, and do they matter? That's always going to be the thing that I think is really going to decide this race.
It always comes down to the independents. You're right. All right, Kristen, thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right. Still ahead on this Friday, Joy Behar goes nuclear, comparing the president to a dictator.
We have to rely on the sanity of Kim Jong-un and Putin over the president of the United States.
Has she gone too far? Some are asking that. Plus, coming up, Steve Hilton, Geraldo Rivera, and more.
Countdown to striking Syria is on.
We're looking very, very seriously, very closely at that whole situation.
We clearly have the U.S., the United Kingdom, and France now willing and committed to doing combat operations.
Details about James Comey's new book that comes out on Tuesday. Man, he really does not like the President of the United States.
It seems to me like he sounds like a disgruntled ex-employee who wants to clear his conscience of what bothered him at the time. If you're that bothered, quit.
Mike Pompeo facing tough questions on day one of his confirmation hearings.
I thought he was terrific. Clear answers, concise answers, and convincing answers. This man ought to be Secretary of State.
We have to rely on the sanity of Kim Jong-un and Putin over the president of the United States.
Joy Behar, I mean, she really has over time become unhinged.
Every day, all you have to do is turn on the news. Every time you see me hit, you know that I'm draining the swamp.
One minute we're looking up at Fox and Friends, then we're looking down. How does that work?
I know. I love this music. It sounds like Friday dance party, folks. Welcome aboard. By the way, it's Friday the 13th, but you're not superstitious, are you? I mean, that doesn't really work like that.
All right. In a couple of weeks, Ainsley's book comes out. But until that time, we're filling the gap with James Comey's little tomb.
I purposely did not let mine come out the same day his did.
Well, put it this way. Yours is based on fact. A lot of people look at what Comey's take on reality as fiction.
Sure. And the great thing about this book is we're finally going to hear from him, his presentation of what went down between him and the President of the United States. We've got a soundbite. It ran 1 hour ago over on ABC. They are hosting him for an hour with 2020's George Stephanopoulos on Sunday night. Here, the first question is regarding the dossier, which of course we know started the whole Russia collusion obsession, and whether or not Mr. Comey laid all the cards out on the table to the president when he first briefed him at Trump Tower during the transition. Here's the former FBI director.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information. He said, if there's even a 1% chance my wife thinks that's true, that's terrible. I'm a flawed human being, but there's literally zero chance that my wife would think that was true. So what kind of marriage to what kind of man does your wife think there's only a 99% chance you didn't do that?
All right, so lots there to talk about and dissect. Kellyanne Conway, we interviewed her earlier, and she actually said, don't forget he's not under oath. So this is his recollection. The president might respond next week because he has a different story. But the FBI, he did not tell the president that his opponent funded the dossier?
But so we do remember it was described as unverified, salacious material. So bad you couldn't say it in front of James Clapper. I guess he would have blushed. They had to pull him back. They have this briefing with Brennan, Clapper, and the president. It might be the vice president. I'm not sure who else was on for the presidency in Reince Priebus. And then they say, Mr. President, hang back here. And he hangs back and he says, we got this material about this prostitute and this really disgusting thing that took place. They explained to the president. And I'm astounded that James Comey is astounded that the president's most concerned about his marriage. To me, that is a human reaction. He's not worried about the political fallout. He said, I'm worried about my marriage fallout. I thought that would be admirable. And he thinks it's important to say, well, I'm not a perfect human being, but my wife would know there's a 0% chance of that happening. Well, he says that there's a 99% chance my wife understands that, but we need to make sure that doesn't come out. And for him to think that it's not important to know who came up with this, that it was a commissioned dossier put together by your opponents, that's a very important thing, I think.
Well, Brian, you're absolutely right. Just the facts, ma'am. That's what you want from your lawman. Just lay all the facts out. Why did he surgically not include that? Look, the FBI knew that Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC had financed this, and here we are so far along.
Don't you think if someone accused you of that, you would be worried about what Kathy would think, A.
Sure.
But also, wouldn't you say this had to have been funded by my opponent? Who else would have come up with this? If you ask the FBI director that, and then he still doesn't say, oh, yeah, by the way, I do know that she funded it.
Right.
He knew that information and kept it from the president.
Well, it was so curious because after they talked about the dossier and the sketchy details, Mr. Comey said, because Trump was concerned, he said, we are not investigating you. What's curious is, apparently didn't even reveal or were investigating Hillary Clinton because her campaign paid for it. Nonetheless, regarding the skeevy details in the dossier and that conversation, which because it's breakfast time, we're not going to go into. Here's Kellyanne talking about the fact that Mr. Comey is weighing in on their marriage.
I find that particular excerpt to be really egregious and over the top and unacceptable. And I hope people of all political stripes, including those who didn't like Jim Comey in late October 2016, to really push back on it. Frankly put, that's none of his business. President-elect, if he had respect for the office of the presidency and for his job as the FBI director and for the president-elect indeed, he would have sat the man down and given a full briefing or made it part of the other conversation under the guise of, oh, it could have been embarrassing. I didn't want to embarrass him. So then you go out a year and a half later and sell books.
Good point.
And this, again, it's an ongoing investigation. And I do have a report that the Inspector General is waiting to release his report until this book comes out. So that'll begin on Tuesday, unless he got an advance copy, which I don't think he did. Meanwhile, James Comey did sit down on GMA. They released this clip to the other morning show down the road about the spin on Russia interference in the election. He couldn't believe that when he got briefed on this, that the Trump team wasn't concerned about what Russia would do next. They were concerned about how to play to the public. Listen.
President-elect Trump's first question was to confirm that it had no impact on the election. And then the conversation, to my surprise, moved into a PR conversation about how the Trump team would position this and what they could say about this. They actually started talking about drafting a press release. The intelligence community does intelligence. The White House does PR and spin.
You also said you were struck by what they didn't ask.
Very much. No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? How might we stop it? What's the future look like? It was all, what can we say about what they did and how it affects the election that we just had?
All right. So that clip was released about an hour ago. 5 minutes ago, the President of the United States, he's starting to weigh in. He's got at least 2 tweets. We've only got the first one. It starts, James Comey is a proven leaker and liar. Virtually everyone in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was, in fact, fired. He leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. He is a weak just to bring you up to date, remember, it was during that congressional hearing when one of the senators asked, so have you ever leaked anything to anybody? And he said, nope, I haven't done it. And then it was revealed later that Mr. Comey had indeed leaked those memos that he took after the meetings with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and he leaked them to his lawyer friend, professor up at Columbia, so he would put it in the New York Times, the Washington Post, so that would get the special counsel ball rolling. That's what he's referring to about the liar business and the leaker.
He thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. He makes that clear. He apologizes because she heard he's mad at him. She looks up to President Obama and thinks this president is a mob boss. Besides that, it's just as he remembers it. He does not. He calls talk about. He also brings out the fact that Attorney General Lynch hugged him and say he did a good job, even though they have a disagreement on what actually took place during the Hillary Clinton investigation. He also says Lynch was very inconsistent on the Hillary Clinton investigation.
Well, he accuses Loretta Lynch of siding with Hillary's campaign. And in fact, it's interesting because he says regarding her independence, there is classified information that came out early in 2016, which probably will not be released for decades, he says, which would cast serious doubt on her independence if it is made public. So obviously there's a lot he can't say, but essentially he's blowing up Loretta Lynch saying, look, she had her thumb on the scale for Hillary, and we had some information that she was aligned with the Clinton campaign.
When we played that clip for Kellyanne about him weighing in on the president's marriage to Melania, Kellyanne couldn't believe that James Comey was going there. Listen to this.
When the president fired Jim Comey, he gave an interview to a different network where he did note that the man is a showboat and a grandstander. I'll add sanctimonious. I think people are seeing that. If you don't like the job you have, I say to the same people who work here and have in the past, if you don't like the job you have, if you think that you're working in a place that's doesn't comport with the workplace where you want to be, leave. He didn't do that. He got fired. He got fired, and he never objected to any of this.
And now he wants to get his spin out.
There's plenty of it. And remember, it was the Democrats who first called for him to be fired, Mr. Comey, and then the Republicans called for him to be fired. And now that he's fired, a lot of people are featuring his story with glee on some of the other channels because they make the president look bad. So, a lot to chew on.
All right, let us know what you think. In the meantime, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some headlines for us. Jillian?
That's right. Good Friday morning to you guys. Let's begin with a Fox News alert and some sad news. A Massachusetts police officer shot and killed while serving a warrant. Officer Sean Gannon was hit in the head.
Gunshot wound to an officer. Officer down.
Sean was a wonderful, wonderful young man. The sky was the limit for him.
Thomas Latinowicz will be charged with murder. He has more than 100 prior offenses. A caravan of police cars, as you can see here, look at that, escorting Officer Gannon's body overnight. The 8-year veteran of the force leaves behind a wife. Gannon's canine partner was also shot and is recovering. Another Fox News alert. Sources now confirming to Fox News that President Trump is planning to pardon former Vice President Dick Cheney's chief of staff. That announcement likely coming today. Scooter Libby was convicted in 2007 for lying to the FBI and obstructing justice. Libby's sentence was already commuted by President Bush, and his law license was reinstated by the D.C. Court of Appeals in 2016. Moments ago, John Boehner speaking out about House Speaker Paul Ryan's retirement. Ryan's predecessor telling the Today Show that the announcement comes as no surprise.
I've known him a long time. He's a really, really decent, good guy. But he never wanted to be Speaker. I had to beat him to death to take my job.
Boehner saying he knew Ryan would leave once tax reform passed. That's Look at Your Headlines. Send it back to you.
And now Mr. Boehner is working for a big pot company.
Right. And now Jim Jordan, there's evidently some momentum behind Jim Jordan to challenge Kevin McCarthy to be the next speaker. It's going to be an interesting few months. I say that but Paul Ryan doesn't hold that job until the end of this election.
But everyone loves Kevin McCarthy, though, right? Isn't he the front runner?
I think that a lot of the Freedom Caucus feel as though Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise weren't should have been more fiscally responsible. But the Freedom Caucus is only 25 members.
But apparently Mr. McCarthy is already negotiating with them, and he's making the case behind the scenes that if you elect me as Speaker or a leader, I will do some things that you really want done, which would be good for...
It's a good line.
Then again, it's politics, baby. All right. Meanwhile, coming up, Mike Pompeo, who used to be in the Congress, then the CIA, now he wants to become the new Secretary of State. Yesterday, confirmation hearing. How did he do? We're going to talk to South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy about that and more straight ahead.
Plus, the media hyping up James Comey's comments about President Trump.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Will all of that mob boss talk backfire? Steve Hilton doesn't wear a tie.
Fox News alert, the President of the United States just tweeted out about 10 minutes ago regarding James Comey. He is a proven leaker and a liar. Virtually everybody in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was, in fact, fired. He leaked information that was classified for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. He is a weak ... Another tweet will be with us shortly.
Well, Fox News host Steve Hilton is putting Comey on trial in a new Next Revolution in a special that is airing on Sunday night.
Steve Hilton is with us now. Steve, we've only got excerpts. We have not read the whole book yet, but from what you can ascertain, does anything surprise you?
Not really, because I think a lot of people knew before these interviews that, in their view, Comey is a bit of a pompous, sanctimonious narcissist, obsessed with some of these salacious details. And really what we're going to be doing on Sunday night is going behind all that, behind the PR and spin, to use Comey's own words, and actually investigate the serious issues as to whether he actually committed federal crimes in the way he handled the Clinton investigation, the way he closed the Clinton investigation, the way he handled leaks, the leaks that came out once President Trump was elected, and of course the dossier itself, the infamous Russian dossier. In all those areas, there is strong grounds to suspect that he committed federal crimes. So we've assembled a top team of lawyers who are going to look at that and debate it, and that's why we're putting James Comey on trial this Sunday.
All right, Steve, we just got the second page of the tweet. The president had said Comey lied to Congress under oath. He is weak and untruthful slimeball who was at times has proven a terrible director of the FBI. His handling of the crooked Hillary case and the events surrounding it will go down as one of the worst botched jobs in history. It was my great honor to fire James Comey, who Steve Hilton, he refers to as an untruthful slimeball, that from the President of the United States.
Well, I think that there's a lot of people who are going to agree with that. And actually, it's not whether he just botched it, but as I said, whether he actually committed crimes. You're not going to get Comey on this book tour that he's about to get going, be pressed on some of these questions, because of course the media love James Comey now, and the establishment love him because of the way he stuck it to President Trump. And so
I'm not sure.
We're providing those serious questions.
I think he's going to get pushback because keep in mind, Hillary Clinton's best-selling book, My Story, she says she was shivved by James Comey. James Comey, they believe, cost her the election. I actually don't believe that. But how is he? He can't be lauded at the same time be blamed.
I don't know about that, Brian. I think consistency is never one of the strongest aspects of people on that side of the fence. So I think that they can have both positions at the same time. In fact, I saw a tweet from, I think it was Neera Tandem, Hillary's former policy chief, who literally said exactly those same things. At the same time, you can believe that Comey cost us the election and he's doing the right thing now by having a go at Trump.
Okay. Remind us what time your show's on Sunday nights.
9 p.m.
9 p.m.
Eastern,
Okay.
Sunday night, the trial of James Comey. Don't miss it.
We'll be watching.
Thank you. All right, Geraldo is going to react to all of this live just ahead. And if you're about to send...
We're here in New York City on this Friday the 13th, and we start with a Fox News alert right now. Moments ago, Vice President Mike Pence boarded a plane on his way to the Summit of the Americas in the country of Peru. There, the Vice President will promote U.S. trade and press our Latin American partners to further isolate the country of Venezuela. White House senior advisor Ivanka Trump is already there, pushing for women's economic empowerment. And President Trump ordering a review of the post office following harsh criticism by the president of Amazon. The investigation will look at its business model, including its role in competitive markets, the post office that is. In a statement, the president saying the USPS is on an unstable financial path and must be restructured to prevent a taxpayer-funded bailout. So they're going to examine the post office. Ainsley.
Thanks, Steve. Well, millions of girls are heading off to college each year, believing that they're about to embark on the best 4 years of their life, only to be confronted by homesickness, roommate conflicts, and challenging course loads. Well, our next guest, Hannah Seymour, has mentored thousands of women over the last 10 years, and she joins us now with advice from her new book. It's called The College Girls Survival Guide, 52 Honest, Faith-Filled Answers to Your Biggest Concerns. Good morning. Congratulations. You have a 4-month at home, and your book was just released. Don't know how you're doing it.
Lots of babies.
What's the number one question you get from college girls?
You know, it's so funny. Over and over and over, I hear, how do I tell my roommate I don't want to live with her again?
Okay,
that is
what's
the
your
number
advice?
one
How do you
question.
do that?
Well, I talk about, one, we need to tell her. We need to tell her as soon as possible. Let's schedule a time. Tell a friend or family member to keep you accountable. And sit down and you don't need to give her a laundry list of all the reasons why. Tell her one thing. Be kind, be courteous, and empathize. Think about how you would feel in her shoes, but tell her, be honest, and then move on.
What are some other tips that you'd like to tell the college students that are watching?
So number one is to expect challenge. Most college students head off to college thinking it's going to be the best 4 years of their lives. And it is a wonderful time, but they don't anticipate the challenges and hardships. And when they don't anticipate them, they're overwhelmed by them. But instead, if we can expect them, we can tackle
What
them
are some of those challenges? Like, I'll hear girls rush a sorority. They didn't get the sorority that was their top choice. They're upset about that. Or course loads are harder and they start to see their GPA go down. It's harder to pull it back up.
Yep. Homesickness. They hate their roommate. It's really hard when you are in a living environment and you don't love your roommate. They can't find their friends. Or harder things like navigating the party scene. Sexual assault is really common on college campuses. There's a lot of things that they're facing and struggling with during those 4 years.
And you say everything you're feeling is normal.
Yes. So I think one of the lies that women often believe is that my experience is unique. No one else has gone through this but me. And so over and over in my book, I tell them, it's normal. What you're feeling, it's normal.
And then this one says, let's see, the way you live in college impacts your 20s more than you think.
Yeah, so it's not just your career and the first job and your salary. The patterns and habits that you create, the way you handle conflict, the way you respond to hardship, the way you build relationships, all of that either propels you into your 20s or you're recovering from it.
What about what I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah, so students, there's so much lack of direction and confusion. Most students, when they graduate from the time of 22 to 32, they will have 4 different jobs. And so part of it is knowing you don't have to have it all figured out. Just know the first step.
I love it. Well, your book, it's right here. It's called The College Girls Survival Guide. Pick it up. It's faith-filled. Your faith is important to you. Biblical answers to many of your questions if you're in college. If you're a mom and a dad, pick it up for your children. Thank you so much.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on your success at such a young age.
Thank you.
You're welcome. New clips of James Comey's first sit-down interview have just been released. We're going to play them for you and get live reaction from Geraldo coming up next. Plus, it looks like he'll be sitting in the stands instead of taking a knee. How Colin Kaepernick might have just blown his shot at getting back on the field.
All right, 29 minutes before the top of the hour. In about 10 minutes, going to be joined by Trey Gowdy. But right now, it's time to go.
It's Friday, so we need to introduce our friend Geraldo.
Author of The Geraldo Show, the book that's out and doing extremely well right now.
That's right. He's at the Hard Rock out there in Cleveland, Ohio. Geraldo, good morning. We want to read you two
the glasses on.
I know it. We want to read you the Hall of Fame, that is to say, Hard Rock Hall of Fame. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The president sent out 2 tweets in the last half hour. First one reads...
Says James Comey is a proven leaker and liar. Virtually everyone in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was, in fact, fired. He leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. He is a weak and untruthful slimeball who was, as time has proven, a terrible director of the FBI. His handling of the crooked Hillary Clinton case and the events surrounding it will go down as one of the worst botched jobs of history. It was my great honor to fire James Comey.
It was my honor.
Geraldo.
What's your reaction?
First of all, I apologize for the big delay, just with the remotes and everything. It's a kind of a lag. Excuse me. I understand that the president feels very strongly, passionately, almost a hatred for James Comey. But you mentioned the president fired the FBI director. That's true. But the man who wrote the memo that really led to Comey's demise was none other than Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general who is leading the way in terms of Russiagate and all the rest. So I think it is ironic that the man who is widely being pilloried by people on the right, people who support the president, for unfairly targeting him. And believe me, I am absolutely on board in terms of the feds overstepping and crushing the president's rights. I mean, that raid on Michael Cohen's office the other day was absolutely unnecessary. They didn't try to subpoena those materials prior to going in and busting up and violating the lawyer-client privilege. In terms of Comey and the book and the president's bitter feelings about it, it's obvious that Comey, by going to the Columbia professor, leaking, vital information that was secret information, confidential information, DOJ information to the professor at Columbia and then to the New York Times. He is a leaker. The president is absolutely right about that. Whether or not he's a liar, I think, remains to be seen. We will test his version of the facts when we see them against the historic record. But all I can say is that the president, I've known him forever. I sympathize with him. I understand how frustrated he must be. He's trying so hard to be a great president and make America great again and all the rest of it, the 45th president of the United States, only the 45th man to hold that darn office, and here he is totally distracted by things that, porn stars and payoffs to Playboy playmates and things of that nature that really have nothing to do really with the running of the country, guys.
But Geraldo, a couple of things. I mean, number one, we could look at a serious strike with allies in Syria. The president's got that. He's also looking at maybe re-entering the TPP. He's got major issues going on with this investigation. Could this Comey thing trump it all? Do you think this will be the #1 story?
Oh, I have no doubt that Comey and now that the $30,000 payoff to a doorman about a purported love child that, in all likelihood, like the sordid events in Moscow never happened. But the president is dealing with all this tabloid stuff. Access Hollywood has resurfaced. My goodness. So it's the same old stuff. Access Hollywood again. Billy Bush again. The Playmate again. Stormy Daniels, the porn star again. When indeed, as you suggest, here he is contemplating what is a measured strike against Syria that will do more good than harm. The North Korean negotiations coming up. The TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think it's brilliant for the president to reconsider the United States entering into this financial agreement with the countries that rim the Pacific Basin as a counterbalance to China. I don't think anything scares China more than the concept of the United States and all the other Pacific countries allied economically against the Chinese giant. It's just that the president wants a better deal than the one struck by the Obama administration.
Geraldo.
And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just like NAFTA.
Geraldo, if the president in the UK and France decide...
I'm sorry, Allison.
If the president and France and the UK decide to strike Syria, don't you think that story would be a bigger story than Comey's book that's released on Tuesday?
Again, I apologize for the delay in stepping on you, Ainsley, but I think that the United States, the United Kingdom, and France certainly have the military wherewithal. Indeed, the United States could do it on its own, strike Syria, strike Assad's resources, military assets in retaliation for the gas attack, the horrifying gas attack that the president was so righteously revolted by. I mean, we all were seeing those children writhing in their agony, suffocating in their own bodily fluids. It was just horrifying. My fear, though, Ainsley, is that now that it is in cold blood, now that days have passed, now that Russia has said, watch it, or we're going to hit your missiles coming in, one thing or another, I fear that a military strike right now might be not worth the price we will pay in complicating the situation in Syria. I want the president to think long and hard, as I'm sure he is doing, particularly now. He's got Mike Pompeo, he's got John Bolton, he's got some people around him that can advise him. I really do think that sometimes less is more, particularly when it's in cold blood. If we had done it right away, right after the gas strike, it would have been different. I fear that now the consequences might be more complicated than the benefit we might glean.
All right. Go pick up his book, The Geraldo Show. He's on location out in Cleveland. Big book signing today. Geraldo, thanks so much. Great to see you last night and great to see you this morning.
All right. Meanwhile, 22 minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian's got some news.
Good Friday morning, keeping an eye on some of the headlines, starting with this. Tell my mom I love her. Those heart-wrenching words in a 911 call from a teen being crushed to death in a minivan. 16-year-old Kyle Push pinned under a folding seat after it flipped on top of him in his school's parking lot. He called 911 twice, but Cincinnati police say they couldn't hear his exact location. His father finding his body nearly 6 hours later. Honda says there's been no seat-related recalls for this particular vehicle. Outrage as a convicted cop killer strikes a deal to get out of prison early. Robert Iacovello Jr. shot Massachusetts officer Daniel Talbot in the face in 2007. He thought the off-duty officer was a member of a rival gang. Iacovello was sentenced to life, but an appeals court tossed out the conviction on a court technicality. Prosecutors made a plea deal instead of retrying the case. Iacovello could get out in 2 years. At least one NFL team is standing up to national anthem kneelers. The Seattle Seahawks postponing a workout with disgraced QB Colin Kaepernick after reportedly refusing to end his protests. NFL and college football great Herschel Walker weighed in earlier.
If you get the job, you got to do what they ask you to do. That's your job. You got to stand, and they want you to stand. If you're not going to stand, you're not getting a job.
The former 49er has been unemployed since the 2016 season. Guys.
All right. Jillian, thank you very much. A lot going on.
All right, 20 minutes left, but a big guest coming straight ahead. South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy has spent a lot of quality time with James Comey. What does he think about the quotes that are coming out from his book?
And he won over the nation on America's Got Talent, and now ventriloquist, singer, comedian, and friend of this show, Terry Fator, is celebrating his 9th year on the Vegas Strip. He joins us live, coming up.
I see trees of green, red roses too.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No, I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
But why not lay out all the information? There you've got former FBI Director James Comey breaking his silence on video about the funding of the anti-Trump dossier.
Here to react, South Carolina Congressman, chairman of the Oversight Committee and author of this brand new book, bestseller, Unified. He wrote it with Senator Tim Scott. Congressman, got to have you respond directly to that. Do you think it was necessary for him to tell the president in the step back that it was financed by your opponents, by Hillary Clinton?
It's certainly a relevant fact. Whether or not he should have told the president, the FBI certainly should have told the FISA court. That's my bigger concern, is they didn't tell the folks who authorized the warrant. It's a really relevant fact. It helps you understand the motivation behind that salacious material or allegations. But for sure, they should have told the court. I think it would have been nice to tell the person who was the subject of the dossier also.
Well, he had conversations with the president. So if the president found out about this dossier, don't you think his question to Comey was probably, where did you get this information? He would. I'm almost certain he asked him that. And so for Comey to say, I never told him it was financed by Hillary Clinton, what does that say about him?
Well, of course, you would want to know where you got the information, because that determines how reliable it is and whether or not it can be used. So we already know the FBI did not vet or investigate the allegations in the dossier. So if I were the president, I'd want to know, where'd you get it, and how have you vetted it before you used it?
Sure. Well, apparently, when they were talking about the dossier at the Trump Tower meeting during the transition, Congressman, it does sound, according to the book, that at one point Mr. Trump was told by Mr. Comey, we are not investigating you. So that lines up with what the president has said in the past. And also, he goes on to say that apparently it does not, whatever President Trump told Mr. Comey, it does not rise to the level of obstruction of justice. He did nothing wrong. Ultimately, doesn't that help the president's case?
These Comey memos are Defense Exhibit A in an obstruction of justice. I've read them. Very few members of Congress have, and no one outside of Congress has read the Comey memos. I think they ought to be released. I think they ought to be released publicly, but they certainly ought to be released to Congress. They would be Defense Exhibit A in an obstruction of justice prosecution.
Is there any reason they should not be revealed? I mean, are there national secrets in there, grand jury testimony, any of that stuff the DOJ always says?
I hope not. Comey gave them to a law professor, so I hope not.
What about the idea of a former FBI director writing a book? What was the process? What is the process? Would he have had to, would the DOJ have to read the book before to make sure he wasn't releasing classified information? And what do you think about an FBI director writing a book?
I think it's sad. I think it's sad. One of the things Director Comey and I did agree on is we need an apolitical FBI. We had some fairly heated exchanges about that. I can't think of anyone who's done a better job of politicizing the FBI than he has in the last 36 to 48 hours by talking about tanning bed goggles and the length of a tie. That is beneath the dignity of the offices that he held. So I'm really disappointed whether or not the intelligence communities vetted this book. I hope he let them do it so he's not disseminating classified information. My guess is he did. But the writing of the book in general, and then some of the things that he's talking about, are just frankly beneath the dignity of some really important offices he once held.
Talked about how much stronger he was. The president wasn't as tall as he thought. He tried to bring him in. You got to be a stronger guy to bring me in than the president is. Real quick, when he came out with his press conference October 28th and said that we found these additional emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop, he did it because he was under the assumption that she was going to win. And she didn't want her to start her presidency under the guise of a scandal or illegitimate. What's your reaction to that?
Well, there were a lot of things that could have called into question the legitimacy of that investigation, including what he's now made reference to that some of us have alluded to a lot in the past, which is the real reason he had the July 5th press conference. It wasn't the tarmac. It was information he had about Loretta Lynch that if it became public, people would question their objectivity. Right. Look, I defended him in 2016. This is Hillary Clinton's fault that he found himself in that position, and it was Democrats that wanted to put him in jail this time last year. It wasn't Republicans. So he had a tough 2016, but he's making it worse by writing this kind of a tabloid book.
Congressman, what about Pompeo? Will he be confirmed?
I hope so. You know, Ansley, it got 13 Democrat votes a year ago. I mean, go back and look at how many Republicans opposed John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. Almost none. So for a group that likes to talk about bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle, you have a uniquely well-qualified Secretary of State candidate, and you can't find a single Democrat on the committee to support him?
Yeah, you think same-sex marriage should have been a question? That's what Senator Cory Booker wanted to know.
I know.
No, I doubt they asked that of Clinton or Kerry, and I guarantee they didn't ask, can you be independent from the person who's giving you the job? It's a double standard. Thank goodness Mike Pompeo is uniquely well qualified, and I hope some Democrats not on the committee will insist that he be brought to the floor.
Well, there are a number of Democrats who live in states that Donald Trump won big, that if they don't vote that way, they're going to be in hot water come November. Trey Gowdy, Congressman from the great state of South Carolina. We know it's really noisy there in the Capitol. Thank you very much for talking to us today.
Joe Montana-like concentration, despite shut out all the noise.
10 minutes till the top of the hour. Still ahead, he won over the nation on America's Got Talent, and now the ventriloquist, singer, and comedian Terry Fator is here to unveil a brand new character. Live next.
But first, let's check in with Bill Hemmer for what's happening at the top of the hour.
Joe Montana ruined my childhood. Good morning, guys. Good show, good interview, a ton of reaction on the Comey matter. What the RNC is saying this morning. A pardon for Scooter Libby. Judith Miller went to jail over the Scooter Libby matter. She is here live to talk about that. We are on Syria watch, certainly, trying to read between the lines on a possible military response. And what Facebook's saying about privacy and profits.
The nation back in 2007 on America's Got Talent.
And now ventriloquist, singer, and comedian Terry Fator is celebrating his 9th year performing at the Mirage out in Vegas.
Hard to believe 9 years. Here to debut his new character on this special anniversary is Terry Fator himself. Hey, Terry, who'd you bring with you?
Can you not tell who I am?
You look just like Paul McCartney.
I'm one of the most famous singers in history.
With the smallest vest ever.
Yes. You didn't realize I was this small, did you?
Terry, that's amazing.
This is Paul McCartney. You know, I told myself 9 years ago when I started the Mirage that every single year on my anniversary I was going to introduce a new character, a new puppet. And this year, we introduced Paul McCartney as one of the puppets. I actually introduced 2 puppets.
So not only are you doing this without moving your mouth, you have to do it in a British accent.
Yes.
And does he sing as well?
Of course I do.
Well, we'd like to hear a number.
Absolutely. I don't understand the way you think, saying that she's yours, not mine. Sending roses and your silly dreams, really just a waste of time. That's the song we do. Michael Jackson's the other puppet, and I have Michael Jackson on one side and Paul on the other, and they sing that song. Well, no, they sing The Girl Is Mine to a lady in the audience.
Oh, that's fantastic. What's the reaction when you're out in Las Vegas at the Mirage? People, you know, they do call out names and they say, "Hey, do so and so now." What's the #1 person people want to hear these
Michael
days?
Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Really?
Michael Jackson.
Not the president.
No, still. Well, how does Michael Jackson go?
Yeah.
She's out of my life. She's out of my life. So I can do it without moving my lips. So I have a puppet, but the most popular character in my show now is my Donald Trump puppet.
I bet.
And he is, you know, I was a little worried because it's so inflammatory and people are just so, they're just so bipolar about the whole thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to do it. And I don't get political, though, so I just really have a lot of fun. Yeah, I have a lot of fun with the bigness of his character.
Okay.
And that's really how I do it. So, and people love it.
Showtime at the Apollo, April 19th at 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on Fox. Terry Fator, Paul McCartney, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Back in a moment.